What if the character you laughed at the most was the one who was hurt the most? What if the girl that everyone dismissed as being comedic relief and fan service was actually the best representation of the soul of Fire Force's most grounded and emotional character? Join me in today's newest Anime Explained video where we're going to be doing a full character analysis of Tamaki from Fire Force, breaking down why she's more than just a fan service character and how her arc reflects real emotional vulnerability, resilience, and is the best example in the series of human growth itself. We'll obviously be covering background and powers, personality, internal struggle, how her arc revolves around going from being a character of self-doubt to being a character of heroism, her symbolic role in the narrative, and how she contrasts with the other members of Fire Force Company 8, as well as some other characters in the series. So we're going to start first with the background and just the core traits. So Tamaki was introduced early on as a third-generation pyrokinetic from Company 1, known for her playful yet clumsy nature and that signature lucky let your lure gag where she accidentally ends up compromising herself by being in these compromising positions, usually for comedic relief, and God knows there was a lot of skin being shown in those scenes. But this power that is asleep inside of her, when she fully utilizes it, it grants her agility, enhanced reaction speed, and heightened combat ability. She's no slouch in a fight, yet from the beginning she's portrayed as someone who has been shown as having unrealized potential but a lot of emotional baggage. It would prove to be one of the most effective moments in the series where we learn the origins of her lucky let your lure in season 2 and see how it led to a lot of her insecurities being birthed, which served as a crescendo to her eventually tapping into her dormant power while training. The real personality behind the gags is what you have to look at now. You could almost boil this down to Tamaki early on having fake confidence and having a very real fear based on the insecurity she had. So Tamaki's comedic roles, they hide a more serious truth. She is extremely insecure. She's someone who does want to do good. She wants to be respected, and most importantly, she wants to be taken seriously, but she constantly finds herself being undermined both by the narrative gags as well as, most importantly, her own self-doubt. Unlike someone like Maki, who has her own powers and identity, Tamaki is constantly trying to earn her place. When you read the story closely, this internal conflict, it drives her decisions throughout the entirety of the manga. This makes that moment where we see her insecurities being put on display, like when she's doubting her own power, comparing herself to others. It serves as a fuel for the moment where we finally see her begin to scratch the surface of her potential during that training that she had that Benimaru was overseeing. She wasn't just someone who was being used strictly as a fan service character like some fans might say, but instead she was slowly overcoming the mental hurdles and gaining her own real self-confidence in herself and her abilities. She was forming a true conviction, which makes you view the moments where her insecurities turn into anger previously in a way different manner. She is someone who is of great courage and she has a strong sense of justice, but it takes a while for us to see it and fully get there and see it on display. That's why we needed to see that oh so important encounter with Lieutenant Rekka, because that insecurity, it was weaponized and it was gaslighted by her former superior Rekka, who betrays her trust, leaving Tamaki emotionally shattered, questioning whether her faith in others was really something of a weakness. While it can be easy to write her off as being a damsel in distress, since she was shown calling for Shinra to save her too often, one thing that a lot of Battle Shonen fans tend to miss is that there's actually true strength in acknowledging your own shortcomings and your limitations, and that it helps make you strong when you realize that you need to depend on someone else for help. I get the notion to boil it down to it just being a damsel moment, particularly since there are several times in the first couple of seasons in the anime where you see multiple signs that she has feelings for Shinra, but to just limit it to her to do that is a simple disservice of her character to only focus on that. You have to look at the totality of the circumstances. Seeing her clumsiness first show itself when she was at school, and then in the several times throughout the anime where it placed her in your mind as someone who was a expected form of comedic relief. Seeing her put her faith in the wrong person like Rekka, it was meant to show how easily someone so pure and innocent can be taken advantage of. And then through her interactions with Shinra, we see what happens when the same damaged person decides to finally put their trust in someone deserving during a time where you can tell Fire Force Company 8 was finally beginning to feel like home to her. She finally had a place where she belonged. It was a rewarding journey for her that makes her a great third generation and an even greater character. So if this is the case, if I'm singing her praises like this, then why is it that so many people, when you say the name Tamaki and Fire Force, they typically think of fan service? Why is that the only thing people remember? So I think a big culprit of this would be the assault fight. This is something you could look at as being a turning point, but also as being a comedy trap. That fight with Tamaki versus Assault, it is infamous. It is often cited as being peak fan service. On the surface level, it's absurd and it's very horny, but let's reframe it for a second. Tamaki, after being seen as a joke for so long, even by viewers, starts training seriously. And she does get into the confrontation with Assault, and she has determination, and she's being embarrassed multiple times throughout the multiple encounters. Even when she shows her power, it's being overshadowed by this curse, this lucky lecher lure, and she doesn't quit. This gag may be a play for laughs, but her response to it is serious. Throughout that entire time, we see her trying to actively grow, trying to matter, and eventually she does show us that not through an accident, but through resolve, she is a very capable fighter. Tamaki's inner pain and the fact that she's a reluctant hero is something that makes her a very humanized character in this world that is filled with these supernatural beings. Tamaki's most important battle and most important moment, it isn't a fight itself. It's when she finally throws herself between children and certain death, knowing that she might die. No gimmicks, no comic relief, just pure courage. This is where Tamaki shows that she's always been capable of something very important, putting others before herself despite being terrified. That is true heroism. That is what makes a very strong and capable female character and just a good person in general. This idea that you don't want anyone else to get hurt because you aren't good enough, and having that be a fuel for you to improve and to act when the time and the moment calls for you, that's a really big deal. A lesser person would have just shrank away from the call to action. This is the real Tamaki, not the blushing cat girl or the clumsy trope or just the losing my clothes trope, but she's the young woman who continuously keeps showing up, even when she feels like she doesn't truly belong. Then when you get into the symbolism and the identity, you have to start looking at fire and cats and just shame in general. So when you start looking at her full flame in terms of her transformation, I want you to pay close attention to the glowing eyes. So there is symbolism here. So the Nekomata isn't just a supernatural cat and yokai in terms of Japanese folklore. It's also something that's known for duality. It's known for being beautiful and dangerous. It's also known for at times being clumsy as well as cunning. And if we're being honest, Tamaki reflects that contradiction in a lot of ways. She's ashamed of her power, but her power is rooted in her innate instincts, her reflex to protect. Her journey is one of reclaiming the own agency of her character, turning what others mock into her own weapon. Her fire is not as explosive like Shinra's. It's emotional, it's adaptive. It is in so many ways survival based. She feels, she's very in touch with her feelings, and that's what makes her strength so human. And that's what makes the inspiration behind her entire transformed design something that is very, very monumental. In terms of how she contrasts with other characters in Fire Force, let's put Tamaki alongside these other characters. So when you compare it to Maki, Maki is strong, she's confident, she's playful. When you look at Hibana, she is powerful but also emotionally guarded. When you look at Iris, she is pure but she is also broken. Arthur, boy, that boy is delusional as hell, but he is also extremely skilled and powerful. Tamaki is, in my opinion, the most emotionally exposed out of all of them. That makes her feel more real. She doesn't wear a mask. When she's humiliated, we see it all the time. When she's afraid, it's raw. We see it. When the moment calls and she meets it, it is earned. Even with, say, Shinra, the main character, he grows by having others believe in him to an extent. Tamaki doesn't really get that luxury, in my opinion. She has to prove herself silently, and that's a burden that we rarely see get explored so honestly in a shonen series. It's something that makes her character very refreshing for me as a reader. In terms of why Tamaki's growth matters to Fire Force as a whole, Fire Force is a story that I think we could all agree, if you just boil it down to just key themes, it would be faith, identity, and salvation through flame. While others wrestle with gods and demons, the beauty of Tamaki's character is that a lot of her fight, it is internal. She represents the everyday battle, the girl who's trying to matter in a world of gods and monsters. In a lot of ways, she reminds me of Lucy Heartfilia, obviously written in a different way, but there is some overlap there. And just allowing that human element to her character is something that makes her extremely relatable, because you've been there and I've been there. We've all made the mistake of measuring ourselves against others and doubting ourselves. Tamaki is a reflection of that. That's a genius move to have her interact with someone like Shinra, someone who is so certain of himself when we first meet him. Her journey is to remind us that even with a comedic relief character, she might be one of the characters who shows the most honest version of what it means to grow. Too often with battle shonen, we have a tendency to measure growth in terms of combat. Which, don't get me wrong, combat is essential for a battle shonen. It's part of the genre. The internal character writing for a character like Tamaki, that's what truly makes battle shonen like Fire Force take that next step from being a good story to being a great story. In conclusion, Tamaki, she's not the best fighter in Fire Force. I think we all agree on that, but she might be the most human character in Fire Force. And in a story about fire being both something that is destruction and salvation, she is the one who chooses to rise from the ashes of shame again and again and again. That's part of the beauty of that Lucky Ledger lore. Something that should make her feel less than, she still puts her best foot forward even after being embarrassed. If you agree that she deserves more love, hit that like button and share this video with your fellow Fire Force fans, and drop a comment down below. Do you think that Tamaki is underrated, or do you think that maybe I'm just glazing her a little too much? And who should I break down next? Until then, stay strong, stay kind, and obviously stay fiery.